Hello there, and welcome to the Healing Insight channel. Tonight, we are going somewhere ancient and vast and breathtakingly still. Somewhere that exists at the very edge of time, where the ordinary rhythms of the world slow down to something so gradual, so profoundly patient, that the mind can barely comprehend its quiet scale. Imagine thousands of years of snowfall pressing down, turning ancient weight into a crystalline silence that mirrors your own inner strength. As we explore the blue light of glacial depths, you will learn how your mind filters anxiety just like ice purifies light. Let the slow rhythm of the Arctic guide you into a profound, resilient sleep tonight. Did you know that the same pressure that creates a glacier is also the secret to emotional resilience? While the world feels heavy, the science of glacial density teaches us how the subconscious mind finds clarity under stress. Listen closely as we deconstruct your anxieties through the meditative, frozen lens of deep time and absolute stillness. Close your eyes and feel the rhythmic compression of 1,000 winters settling into a masterpiece of blue ice. This is not just a nature study. It is a psychological journey into the mind's capacity for patience and stillness. Discover the calming science of how glacial formations can transform your internal chaos into a clear, tranquil sanctuary. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. Let your body soften, allow your eyes to grow heavy, and let your mind unwind as we explore this fascinating world. Let's begin. There is a sound that glaciers make, or rather, a sound they do not make, and that silence is the very first thing worth noticing as we begin this evening together. When you close your eyes and allow your imagination to carry you to the far northern reaches of Greenland, or perhaps to the southern coast of Iceland, where ancient ice meets the Atlantic in great blue cliffs of compressed time, what you encounter first is not the cold, and not even the light, though the light there is extraordinary in a way that is difficult to describe with ordinary words. What you encounter first is a quality of stillness so complete, so utterly saturating, that the noise you carry inside your own mind begins, very gently, very slowly, to quiet itself. It is as if the ice itself offers an invitation, the way a deep and unhurried breath invites the shoulders to lower, the jaw to soften, the forehead to unknit itself from the particular tensions of this particular day. And it is from this place, this threshold between the ordinary and the vast, that we begin tonight's long and gentle journey. Allow yourself, right now, to feel the quality of that invitation. You do not need to do anything with it. You do not need to travel anywhere or understand anything or arrive at any conclusion. Simply receive it the way a snowfield receives snowfall, which is to say, completely and without effort. The invitation is this, that for the next several hours, the rushing and the deciding and the managing and the solving can simply rest. They will be waiting for you on the other side of sleep, exactly where you left them, no diminished and no more urgent for the pause. But for now, for this long and quiet stretch of night, there is nothing required of you but the willingness to be still enough for something deep and patient and genuinely restorative to find you. The glacier did not arrive suddenly. That is perhaps the most important and most soothing truth about ice of this kind, and it is a truth we will return to again and again as the hours settle around you like layers of freshly fallen snow. A glacier is not a dramatic event. It is not a catastrophe or a flash of brilliance or a sudden transformation that arrives all at once in a single defining moment. It is an accumulation, a slow and patient layering that takes decades, centuries, sometimes many thousands of years to reach the kind of mass and depth that we now recognize as one of the Earth's most enduring and quietly extraordinary natural structures. And tonight, as you prepare to release the weight of your own day, your own week, perhaps your own long season of worrying and managing and simply keeping everything going, there is something profoundly healing in understanding how such enormous strength is built. Not through force, not through urgency or will or cleverness or the determined application of effort, but through repetition and time and the willingness to allow each small addition to matter, each small layer to count as part of something larger than itself. The story of every glacier on Earth begins with a single snowflake, and if that sounds too poetic or too small to be immediately meaningful, consider for a moment what a single snowflake actually is. Each one is a crystalline structure of water molecules arranged into a hexagonal lattice so precise, so geometrically perfect, that no two are ever identical across the entire history of the Earth's atmosphere. Scientists have calculated that the number of possible snowflake configurations is so enormous that it effectively exceeds the number of atoms in the observable universe. Each flake is genuinely unique. Each one weighs almost nothing. It lands on a surface, and if the temperature allows, it simply rests there, delicate and white and temporally complete, a small, cold, perfect thing that has traveled from the clouds to this particular place at this particular moment, and that carries within its crystalline structure the exact chemical signature of the air through which it passed on the way down. Then another falls, and another, and over days and weeks and seasons, a layer forms. That layer, the collection of these innumerable small, unique, beautiful things, begins to be compressed by the weight of what arrives above it. This is the moment where something quietly remarkable begins to happen, something that will concern us greatly tonight, because it mirrors in the most exact and illuminating way the process by which the human mind organizes itself over time. The freshly fallen snow, which glaciologists call new snow or fresh snow, contains an enormous amount of air. It is light and airy and almost sponge-like in its texture, with air pockets filling up to 90% of its total volume. A cubic meter of fresh snow might weigh as little as 50 kilograms. It is mostly space. It is mostly potential, the possibility of something denser and more integrated, not yet realized, the raw material of something extraordinary that has not yet begun its transformation. But as each new snowfall arrives and presses down upon what came before, those air pockets begin to shrink. The snowflakes begin to change shape in a process that is gradual and irreversible and quietly beautiful, losing their delicate, branching arms, rounding themselves into smaller, denser granules called Feen. The word Feen comes from a German word meaning last year or of the previous season, and it carries within it this sense of something that has been through at least one cycle, that has been tested and compressed and transformed by the simple, patient application of weight and time. Feen is the intermediate stage, the quiet and unhurried middle ground between the airy freshness of new snow and the dense, crystalline integrity of true glacial ice. And it can persist for decades beneath the surface, slowly changing, slowly surrendering its lightness, slowly becoming something with more coherence and more depth, and more of the quiet structural quality that we will come to recognize throughout this evening as the essence of resilience. What makes this transformation so deeply resonant, when we hold it beside our own inner experience and allow it to speak to us, is that it proceeds without effort. The Feen does not try to become ice. It simply is what it is, and the conditions around it, the weight above it, the time passing through it, the long patience of the seasons cycling overhead, do the transformative work. There is a lesson here that the nervous system understands more readily than the thinking mind sometimes allows. Transformation of the genuine and lasting kind does not happen through striving. It happens through allowing, through being in the right conditions, through trusting the slow and accumulative process, through remaining present to what is without needing it to already be what it will eventually become. Think about the way your own mind processes the events of your life. The difficult conversations, the moments of uncertainty, the stretches of ordinary days that blur together until you can no longer distinguish one from the next with any particular clarity or sharpness. In the beginning, each new experience arrives fresh, airy, carrying a kind of brightness or an edge of sharpness that can feel almost overwhelming in its immediacy. A new worry lands with all the lightness and the cold precision of a freshly fallen flake, complete and distinct and apparently impossible to ignore. But given time, and given the quiet pressure of reflection and continuity, and the simple forward movement of days, those experiences begin to transform. They lose their jagged edges. They round themselves into something denser, more integrated, more simply part of the landscape of who you are. Less like something that just happened to you, more like something that has become part of you. The psychological research on what is sometimes called slow living or deceleration, or the intentional creation of rhythmic routine in a fast-paced and perpetually demanding digital world, supports this understanding in a way that is both rigorously grounded and unexpectedly poetic. Studies in contemplative psychology and in the neuroscience of attention have found consistently that the human nervous system benefits profoundly from rhythm. Not excitement, not novelty, not the constant stimulation of new and shifting information arriving faster than it can be absorbed, but the steady, repetitive accumulation of small, calm experiences. The morning ritual that is the same every day. The walk taken at the same time along the same familiar path. The practice of arriving in the same quiet place, in the same unhurried way, and allowing the mind to do what it most needs to do, which is to process without pressure and integrate without urgency. Like snowflakes landing on a surface that is simply willing to receive them, without requiring them to be anything other than what they are. In our current world, this willingness to receive at a glacial pace has become something genuinely radical. The digital environment that most of us now inhabit rewards speed above almost everything else. Information arrives in bursts and flashes, each new stimulus designed, often quite deliberately by teams of engineers and behavioral scientists, to capture the attention before the previous stimulus has had any chance to settle or integrate or be understood. The average person in a highly connected society encounters more information in a single day than a person living 2 centuries ago might have encountered in an entire year. And the nervous system, which evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to process a much slower and more rhythmic input, responds to this relentless acceleration with what we have come to call stress, anxiety, cognitive fatigue, the uncomfortable and persistent sense that there is always more to do, more to know, more to respond to, and never quite enough time or space to simply be present to any single thing in the unhurried way that genuine understanding requires. The glacial process knows nothing of this pressure. The glacial process does not hurry. It does not compare itself to other glaciers or worry about whether it is accumulating quickly enough or transforming efficiently enough. It simply continues, layer upon layer, snowflake upon snowflake, season upon decade upon century, and in doing so, it creates something of extraordinary beauty and strength and depth. And tonight, as the voice continues and the night deepens around you, we are learning to allow that same principle to apply to the inside of the mind. To allow each thought to land lightly and completely. To allow each breath to be a layer of gentle accumulation. And to allow the whole slow, patient, unhurried process of rest to do what only rest can do. There is a concept in mindfulness psychology and in the growing body of research around contemplative neuroscience that describes the brain's capacity to return to a slower, more integrated rhythm of activity, a rhythm that resembles, in certain beautiful and precise ways, the gradual accumulation of glacial layers. When we speak of the default mode network, the constellation of brain regions that becomes most active during rest and reflection, and the gentle, undirected wandering of the mind, not obligated to any particular task, we are describing something that functions best not during stimulation or performance or demand, but during the spaces between. The quiet moments, the unhurried transitions, the hours when the body is still and the mind is allowed to soften its grip on urgency and simply process, as Fian slowly becomes ice, all that it has been carrying without ever quite having the space to set down. The air bubbles trapped in that Fian are particularly fascinating, and not only for their science, but for what they represent when we look at them through the gentlest possible lens. When snow first falls and each crystal lands and rests upon what came before, tiny pockets of atmosphere are captured between the branches and facets of the individual crystals, sealed within the matrix as the crystals begin to round and densify into Fian granules. These air pockets do not immediately disappear. They persist, sealed within the increasingly dense material as small spheres of ancient atmosphere. These bubbles are not flaws or imperfections. They are records. They are the Fian's way of holding onto something of the exact moment in which each layer was formed. Scientists who study ice cores drill down through hundreds of meters of compressed ice precisely to access these bubbles, analyzing their chemical composition to understand what the atmosphere was like thousands and even hundreds of thousands of years ago. The bubbles hold the chemistry of the ancient air. The ice holds the bubbles, and the entire system simply continues, faithfully and without judgment, holding what was given to it. This is a gentle and useful way to think about the mind's relationship with the scattered thoughts and concerns and half-formed worries that seem to inhabit the mental space in the early hours of a restless night. In the early stages of rest, or in the early stages of any meditative practice, the mind can feel like fresh snow, porous and full of air, busy with those small pockets of unfinished thought. A worry about tomorrow. A replay of a conversation from earlier in the day. A to-do list that keeps rearranging itself. A vague and unnamed sense of unease that drifts through consciousness without quite settling anywhere. These are the air bubbles of the waking mind, and they are not problems to be solved or dismissed. They are simply what the mind carries as it begins to settle. They are records of the day, of the season, of the particular atmospheric conditions of this particular life at this particular moment. And the transformation that genuine rest offers, the transformation that glacial time offers, is the slow and patient compression of all that scattered lightness into something more unified, more dense, more quietly integrated. Not because the thoughts are crushed or silenced, but because they are given time to round and settle and lose their urgency, the way Fian becomes ice, and the air bubbles slowly shrink and are sealed and become part of the record rather than the noise. Researchers who study sleep and memory consolidation have found that the sleeping brain engages in a process profoundly similar to this glacial compression, and understanding even the broad outlines of this process can make it easier to trust the night. During the deep, slow-wave stages of sleep, the brain engages in what researchers call memory consolidation, taking the scattered impressions and experiences of the day and gently organizing them, connecting related pieces, reinforcing what carries emotional significance, softening what was overwhelming, and allowing the incidental to dissolve into background. This is not a violent or effortful process. It is slow and rhythmic, driven by large, rolling electrical waves that move through the cortex in great synchronized sweeps, like weather moving across an open plain, like snow falling in quiet succession on a surface that has been accumulating all season. These waves, which scientists call slow oscillations, travel from the front of the brain to the back and back again, and in doing so, they appear to coordinate the transfer of the day's experiences from the temporary storage of the hippocampus into the long-term architecture of the cortex. They are the mechanism of the glacier, the means by which the fresh and airy accumulation of the day becomes, gradually and permanently, part of the deep ice of who you are. The weight of a glacier, when you truly try to comprehend it, is almost beyond the reach of the ordinary imagination, and perhaps that is part of why contemplating it has such a genuinely quieting effect. The Greenland ice sheet alone, which covers roughly 80% of that enormous island in the far North Atlantic, contains approximately 2.9 million cubic kilometers of ice. If that number remains abstract, consider it this way. If the entire Greenland ice sheet were to melt, global sea levels would rise by approximately 7 meters. That is the weight of something that can reshape the coastlines of entire continents. That is the weight of accumulated time, of millions of seasons of snowfall pressing down upon itself, compressing into a mass so dense and so heavy that it has actually caused the bedrock beneath it to sink, slowly and over millennia, under the patient and completely unhurried pressure of all that accumulated ice. Geologists call this isostatic depression. The land itself bows under the patience of the ice. Not through force, not through impact, but through the quiet and irresistible application of weight sustained across time. And yet, for all that incomprehensible weight, there is something about the pressure of a glacier that is not violent. It is not sudden or explosive or destructive in the way that earthquakes and volcanoes are destructive. It exerts its enormous force so slowly over such vast timescales that the rock beneath it yields not through fracture, but through a kind of deep, plastic accommodation, deforming incrementally over thousands of years in a process of such gradual and patient power that to observe any given moment of it would look, to any ordinary observer, like perfect stillness. The mountain moves. The land sinks. But you would need geological time to witness it. This is the quality of pressure that is, paradoxically, most deeply calming to the human nervous system. The steady, even, unhurried kind. The kind that simply holds. The research on deep touch pressure, developed through the observations of researchers and clinicians working with people whose nervous systems responded poorly to the ordinary texture of the world, has found consistently that steady, moderate, even pressure applied to the body activates the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest and recovery and the long, slow work of repair and restoration. This type of pressure measurably reduces the production of cortisol while increasing the circulation of serotonin and dopamine. Weighted blankets work on this principle. The practice of swaddling infants, which calms them through steady, even pressure, works on this principle. And the ancient, patient weight of a glacier, pressing down on the earth with such slow and steady and completely unhurried intention, speaks to something in us that understands, at a cellular and perhaps even evolutionary level, the calming quality of weight that is held and even and gentle. Not dropped suddenly, not applied with force, simply present, simply there. Allow yourself to feel that quality right now. The weight of the blanket, or the bed, or simply the earth's gravity holding you in place, holding you against the surface you are resting on with the same steady, unhurried certainty with which the ice presses against the bedrock beneath it. There is nothing you need to resist. There is nothing in this weight that asks you to respond or act or push back against it. The weight is simply there as it has always been there, steady and unhurried and completely reliable, asking nothing of you but the willingness to receive it. This is the first and most fundamental lesson of the glacier. That weight, when it accumulates slowly and with patience, does not crush. It transforms. It builds over the long, quiet span of time something of extraordinary depth and coherence and beauty. The architecture of crystalline ice is one of the most beautiful structures that nature has ever produced, and the process by which it forms is not a simple or instantaneous one. This deserves to be understood slowly, the way the ice itself forms slowly, because within this understanding there is a quality of recognition that can settle something in the listening mind. Deep within the body of a glacier, where firn has been accumulating and compressing for decades, and the pressure has been building patiently for centuries, water molecules begin to do something quite astonishing. They arrange themselves. In liquid water, molecules move freely and constantly, shifting and rearranging in a chaotic and relatively undirected dance, bumping into each other and sliding past each other with all the anarchic freedom of liquid matter. But when conditions are precisely right, when temperature and pressure align in the slow and deliberate way that glacial depths uniquely provide, those molecules begin to find their places within a larger pattern. They begin to organize into a lattice structure, a regular, repeating geometry of hydrogen bonds that creates the crystalline form we recognize as ice. This organization does not happen all at once, in a single dramatic moment of transformation. It happens gradually, one molecular bond at a time, as each water molecule settles into its position within the growing crystal, contributing its small and specific contribution to the larger pattern that is forming around it. And the ice that results from this slow and patient crystallization is not the fragile, brittle thing that forms on a puddle overnight in early winter. It is dense and coherent and plastic in the precise technical sense of the word, meaning it is capable of flowing, capable of bending rather than breaking under the forces that act upon it, capable of bearing enormous weight with a flexible integrity that only comes from having been formed slowly, under the right conditions, with all the time the process needed. The crystallization process is a beautiful mirror for the way human resilience is actually built, and understanding this parallel may quietly shift the way you think about the difficulty you carry and the strength you are growing. The cultural mythology of resilience tends to favor the dramatic narrative, the sudden transformation in the face of crisis, the moment of decision that changes everything, the flash of insight after which nothing is the same. These stories are compelling and sometimes true, but the psychological research on what makes resilience durable, what makes it available not just in the shining moment of crisis, but in the long and ordinary years of daily life, tells a much quieter story. A glacial story. Studies in post-traumatic growth, the documented phenomenon by which some people emerge from significant hardship with a deepened sense of meaning, connection, and inner strength, consistently find that this growth is not something that happens in the immediate aftermath of difficulty. It is not the dramatic flip of a switch. It unfolds over months and years, like ice forming in the patient deep. It requires a willingness to remain present to one's own experience, without needing that experience to be finished or resolved before it can be valuable. It requires what might be described as the molecular patience to settle slowly into the position that the larger structure needs, to contribute a small, specific contribution to a pattern whose full scope cannot yet be seen. And the research on long-term psychological well-being consistently finds that the single most reliable predictor of resilience is not the absence of adversity. It is the presence of consistent, small practices of self-care, reflection, and genuine connection that over time create in the self what crystallization creates in the ice. A lattice of bonds strong enough to bear weight without breaking, regular enough to have a coherent shape, and flexible enough to flow rather than shatter when pressure exceeds a certain threshold. You do not build that kind of resilience in a dramatic moment. You build it the way glacial ice is built, one bond at a time, one season at a time, in the quiet and unhurried work of simply continuing. There is a concept in glaciology that becomes particularly alive and instructive when we hold it beside this truth about psychological resilience, and it is the concept of plastic flow. True glacial ice, the deep, compressed, crystalline ice of the glacier's interior, where fear has been transformed over many decades into something fundamentally different, does not simply break when subjected to extreme and sustained pressure. Instead, it flows. It deforms without fracturing, moving around obstacles in slow, sinuous curves, finding the path of least resistance not through weakness or passivity, but through a quality of flexible, plastic accommodation that is, paradoxically, a function of the ice's immense internal strength. The molecular bonds in well-formed crystalline ice are strong enough, and the crystal structure regular enough, that rather than shattering under stress, the ice simply reorganizes itself slightly at the boundaries between crystal grains, the layers shifting against one another in a process that allows the glacier as a whole to move forward. Slowly, steadily, inexorably, without losing its fundamental integrity. This is psychological flexibility in its most fundamental and most enduring form. The capacity to deform without breaking. The capacity to move around obstacles rather than insisting on moving through them at the cost of the self's coherence. In contemporary psychological research, particularly in the frameworks of acceptance and commitment therapy, this quality is described as psychological flexibility, the ability to contact the present moment fully and openly, and to change or persist in behavior in ways that serve what is most deeply valued. In even simpler terms, it is the capacity to bend without breaking, to flow without losing shape, to meet what comes with the full force of a self that has developed sufficient internal structure to accommodate even the most demanding pressures without being permanently altered by them. What makes the glacial metaphor so precise and so illuminating here is that plastic flow is not something the glacier chooses or decides. It is simply what the ice does when it has been formed correctly, when the crystalline structure has been built with sufficient patience and regularity that the capacity for graceful deformation under pressure is simply part of the ice's nature. You do not build that capacity by deciding to be more flexible. You build it by doing the slow, consistent work of allowing yourself to be formed correctly, by taking the time that psychological integration actually requires, by giving the molecular bonds of your own resilience the chance to settle into their proper positions, one by one, in the quiet and patient dark. As you breathe now, allow this idea to settle into your body without needing to do anything with it. The slow crystallization of resilience has been happening in you for all the years of your life, through every difficulty navigated and every fear endured, and every morning when you simply chose to continue. You do not need to manufacture it tonight. You simply need to trust that it is there, deep in the interior, formed by the slow and patient compression of all that you have been through. The ice is already in you. Tonight is simply the opportunity to let it rest in its own depth. Imagine now, if the body will allow it, that you are somewhere inside the glacier. Not at the surface, where the wind moves and the temperature shifts with the hours and the crevasses open, and the drama of geological process is sometimes visible and audible and overwhelming in its scale. But deep inside, in the interior, where the pressure has been building for decades and the temperature is constant and the darkness is absolute and complete. There is no weather here in any ordinary sense. There is no variation of light or temperature. There is only the slow and patient hum of molecular bonds holding their positions, the steady architecture of deep time expressing itself in perfect crystalline geometry, the whole immense interior simply being what it is, with the kind of unhurried completeness that does not need to announce itself or justify itself or perform itself for any observer. Everything simply is. And in that being, in that absolute, unhurried, uncomplicated there is a quality of peace that nothing else can quite approximate. The internal structure of deep ice, when examined through the specialized instruments that allow glaciologists to study crystal size and orientation and grain boundaries in detail, reveals a kind of ordered complexity that is deeply satisfying to contemplate. In the uppermost layers of a glacier, the crystals are small and relatively randomly oriented, like the scattered thoughts of a mind in its ordinary waking state, each one distinct and individually visible and pointing in its own particular direction. But as you move deeper, as the pressure increases and the centuries of compression exert their patient influence, the crystals grow larger and begin to align themselves in patterns that reflect the history of the stresses the ice has experienced. The grain boundaries become more regular. The orientation of the crystals becomes more coherent, more unified, more expressive of a single integrated direction of flow. The ice becomes more itself. This progressive alignment, this deepening coherence of the crystal structure under sustained pressure, is what allows the glacier to flow without fracturing. And it is also what happens to a well-rested mind. Sleep researchers have found that the sleeping brain, particularly during the slow-wave stages of deep sleep, engages in a process of neural consolidation that bears a striking resemblance to this crystal alignment. The individual neural circuits that were activated during the day's experiences, those scattered and somewhat randomly oriented impressions, undergo a process of selective strengthening and integration during sleep that leaves the neural landscape more coherent in the morning than it was the evening before. The experiences that were repeated or that carry emotional weight are strengthened. The ones that were incidental are allowed to fade. And the result is a brain that is, in a real and measurable sense, more aligned, more coherent, more capable of the integrated and flexible functioning that the day ahead will require. This is why sleep is not a passive state, not simply the absence of waking consciousness. It is an extraordinarily active process of internal reorganization. It is the nightly opportunity for the crystal structure of your experience to settle into more coherent alignment. Every night of deep sleep is a layer of Fian becoming ice, adding to the depth and density and quiet coherence of the self. There is a quality of light inside glacial ice that exists nowhere else on Earth, and to understand it requires a gentle excursion into the physics of light and the remarkable selective properties of frozen water. When white light, which contains all the colors of the visible spectrum, from the warm reds and oranges of lower frequencies to the cool blues and violets of higher ones, enters a body of deep glacial ice, something differentiated and quietly beautiful happens to its component wavelengths. The longer wavelengths, the red and orange and yellow end of the spectrum, are relatively easily absorbed by the molecular structure of the ice crystals. They encounter the lattice of hydrogen bonds and are taken in, their energy absorbed and dissipated within the ice itself. But the shorter wavelengths, the blues and blue-greens at the cooler end of the visible spectrum, scatter. They bounce off and around and through the crystal lattice in a cascading, diffuse process that sends them deeper into the ice, further from the surface, further from the ordinary light of day, traveling through the crystal structure in an extended internal journey that gives them a quality of depth and resonance that no surface light can match. The result is that when you look into truly deep glacial ice, into a crevasse where the ancient interior is exposed, or into the carved face of a tidewater glacier where centuries of compression are laid bare, what you see is blue. Not the pale, reflective blue of sky in water, but a deep, saturated, otherworldly blue that seems to come from within the ice rather than from any external source. A blue that carries somehow a sense of great depth and antiquity and absolute quiet that no other color quite manages to convey. Scientists who work regularly with glacial ice often describe this color as one of the most arresting and emotionally resonant things they have ever encountered. It is the color of compressed time, the color of light that has traveled further and deeper than ordinary light and emerged somehow purer for the journey. The physics that produces this extraordinary blue is precisely analogous to something the mind does constantly, though usually without our conscious awareness. In the language of stress research, we can think of the stresses that come our way as arriving in a spectrum, much like the spectrum of light. Some stresses are long-wave, chronic and background and slow-moving. The persistent low-grade pressure of financial uncertainty, the gradual accumulation of relationship friction, the slow erosion of energy that comes from years of not quite sleeping well or not quite feeling entirely at home in one's own life. And some stresses are shortwave, acute and sharp and immediate. The sudden bad news, the unexpected confrontation, the moment of physical danger or social threat that sends a sharp pulse of adrenaline through the system. The most psychologically sophisticated and healthy response to this full spectrum of incoming stresses involves learning to engage with them the way the ice engages with the spectrum of incoming light, absorbing what can be usefully absorbed, what genuinely needs attention and response and integration, and allowing the rest to scatter, to move through and past the interior without lodging there and accumulating into a burden. The ice does not try to manage the blue. It does not decide through an act of will to let the blues pass through. It simply, by virtue of its own molecular nature, engages differently with different wavelengths. And the result is not distress or effort or the strain of selective attention. The result is that extraordinary blue light, that luminous depth, that quality of having engaged with everything that came toward it and emerged, somehow, more itself for the encounter. The mind that is genuinely at rest, the mind that has developed through the slow crystallization of consistent practice, a coherent enough internal structure to engage selectively rather than reactively with the incoming stream of experience, does not shut out stresses through effort or denial. It engages with them through the natural filtering that a well-formed internal structure provides. The long-wave stresses, the ones that genuinely deserve attention and care, can be absorbed and processed and integrated. The short-wave ones, the ones that are acute but not ultimately important, scatter off the surface of a well-rested equanimity without penetrating to the depths. And what remains in the interior, what persists at the level of genuine experience, is something like that blue, cool and saturated and infused with a depth that is the product not of avoiding the light, but of allowing it to travel all the way through. The state that psychologists call flow, first described in detail by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in his research at the University of Chicago, has a quality that resembles this glacial filtering in a way worth exploring slowly. When a person is in a genuine state of flow, they are fully absorbed in an activity that meets their current capacities at precisely the right level of challenge. Not so easy as to produce boredom, not so difficult as to produce anxiety, but matched exactly to who they are and what they can do right now. And in this condition, external distractions simply do not penetrate to the level of conscious experience. The ambient noise of the environment, the background murmur of unfinished concerns, the half-heard social notifications and small irritations of ordinary life become invisible. Not through suppression or effort, but through the natural consequence of a mind so coherently engaged with what it is doing that there is simply no available surface for distractions to land on. The distractions scatter at the interface, like the longer wavelengths of light encountering the ice, and what remains in the interior is the pure, deep blue of complete and undivided attention. What makes this relevant to what is happening in your body and your mind right now, as the night deepens and the voice continues and the day recedes further behind you with each breath, is that sleep is its own form of flow. Not a performance or a state of doing, but a state of such coherent and organized non-doing that the ordinary distractions of the waking mind lose their grip on the interior. The to-do list that seemed so pressing an hour ago cannot quite penetrate the increasing depth of the mind's turning inward. The worry that was so vivid and insistent at the surface of the day scatters off the surface of a mind that is doing what it was designed to do. And what remains, what persists in the increasing quiet and depth, is something like that blue. Something cool and deep and saturated with a quality of genuine rest that has been forming beneath the surface of the waking day all along, waiting for the conditions of darkness and stillness to allow it to be reached. There is a quality in the landscape of glaciated regions, when the sky is overcast and the wind is still, of visual silence so complete that it affects the nervous system in ways that researchers in environmental psychology have only recently begun to measure and describe with any precision. When you imagine a wide, open expanse of glacial surface stretching from horizon to horizon, unbroken by trees or buildings or roads, or any of the ordinary visual complexity of inhabited landscapes, the visual field offers something that the modern nervous system almost never encounters: a landscape of extraordinary simplicity. White shading to pale blue shading to gray. No movement that demands interpretation. No objects that require identification or categorization or response. The visual cortex, which has been processing an enormous and essentially relentless stream of complex visual information for every waking hour of the day, is suddenly given almost nothing to do. And in that sudden absence of visual demand, something in the brain's attentional systems gently, almost physically, releases the vigilance that has been maintained since waking. Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, researchers at the University of Michigan who developed the theoretical framework known as attention restoration theory, proposed that the human brain has two fundamentally different modes of attention. One is directed attention, the focused, effortful, voluntary mode used when performing tasks that require concentration and decision-making and the deliberate allocation of cognitive resources. The other is what they called involuntary attention, the mode engaged when the environment itself offers something gently interesting but not demanding or urgent. The Kaplans found, and subsequent research has confirmed in numerous studies, that natural environments with what they called soft fascination, landscapes that engage the senses in a gentle, non-demanding way, specifically environments with open views, natural light, and moderate visual simplicity, consistently produce measurable reductions in directed attention fatigue and improvements in cognitive flexibility and clarity. The glacial landscape is soft fascination in perhaps its most absolute form. There is something genuinely beautiful to look at, something that holds attention with an almost magnetic quality of strangeness and scale. But there is nothing to decode, nothing urgent, nothing that generates the particular neural cost of categorization or response or decision. The visual cortex can rest. The prefrontal lobes can stand down from their constant monitoring and managing. And in that standing down, in that generous and extended release from the obligations of visual complexity, the nervous system begins to move towards something that its ordinary environment rarely permits: genuine restoration. This is one of the quiet gifts of tonight's journey. You are not being asked to look at anything complex or to process anything demanding. The voice continues, carrying its gentle stream of images and ideas, but nothing about it requires your directed attention. Nothing is being tested. Nothing needs to be remembered or applied or evaluated for relevance. The voice is simply a quality of the night, like the sound of wind moving very gently over a surface of ice, present and continuous, and holding you in a quality of soft fascination that asks only that you allow it to be there, as you allow yourself to drift further and further into the interior. The glacier holds within itself a record so complete, so astonishingly detailed, preserved with such extraordinary fidelity across such unimaginable spans of time, that it has become one of the most precious archives in the history of science. When glaciologists drill down through the layers of an ancient ice sheet, extracting those long cylinders of compressed time, what they hold in their hands is nothing less than an atmospheric diary of the Earth itself. The air bubbles sealed in the ice, those small pockets of ancient atmosphere that have survived centuries of compression without being released or altered, contain samples of the gases present at the surface of the Earth when each layer of snow originally fell. Scientists can breathe the past through these tiny windows. They can measure the carbon dioxide levels of pre-industrial, pre-agricultural, pre-human atmospheres. They can identify the isotopic signatures of specific volcanic eruptions that happened on the other side of the planet thousands of years ago. They can read the chemical signatures of ancient droughts, of shifts in ocean circulation, of changes in the distribution of sea ice. The glacier simply held all of it, quietly and without effort and without any intention to be useful, and what it preserved, simply by being what it was, has changed our understanding of the entire planet's history. This is the subconscious mind, rendered as landscape. The psychological literature has long grappled with how to describe the vast and mostly inaccessible archive of experience, emotion, procedural knowledge, implicit memory, and deep structural pattern that lies beneath the threshold of ordinary conscious awareness. But the glacier is more accurate than most metaphors, and it is more accurate because it is not sealed or hidden or threatening. It is simply deep. It is simply patient. It is simply the long and unhurried accumulation of everything that has ever fallen upon it, compressed and organized and preserved with remarkable faithfulness in the deep interior where the pressure is greatest and the conditions are most stable. The subconscious mind, understood this way, is not adversarial. It is an archive. It is the record of your survival. It is the compressed history of every winter you have lived through, every summer you have emerged from, every storm you have endured, and every season of gentleness that deposited its light, airy layer of ease atop the harder compressions below. The wisdom that lives in the subconscious is real wisdom, experientially acquired and practically verified and preserved with the same patient integrity that the glacier preserves the ancient atmosphere within its depths. You do not need to access it consciously to benefit from it. You do not need to understand every layer or excavate every record in order to trust that the foundation is solid. It is there in the deep interior, shaping the topography of your current experience in ways that are mostly invisible but completely fundamental, the way bedrock shapes a glacier's path from far below the surface. The path is determined in the deep. The surface simply follows. The glacial pace. In ordinary usage, this phrase names something frustrating. Progress so slow it cannot be felt. Change that takes so long to manifest that faith in it erodes. But in the context of what we actually know about glaciers, and in the context of what we actually know about how human beings grow and change and deepen into themselves, the glacial pace is not a failure of speed. It is the pace at which bedrock changes. The pace at which mountains are shaped not by sudden catastrophe, but by the patient, persistent application of weight and time, and the slow geometry of a flow so gradual that it seems, to any brief observer, to be no movement at all. Research on personal transformation and psychological growth has found something that can feel counterintuitive when we live in a culture that has industrialized the narrative of sudden change. The most durable changes in human character, the ones that persist through difficulty and do not evaporate when stress returns, are not the dramatic ones. They are not the sudden revelations or the single powerful breakthrough moments, though these have their own genuine value. The most durable changes are the ones that happen gradually beneath the surface of conscious awareness, through the long and unremarkable accumulation of new experiences, new neural connections built slowly through repetition, new emotional associations formed through the patient practice of responding differently, one small moment at a time, until the new response becomes simply the natural one. Until the glacier has moved a millimeter, then another, until the landscape is genuinely, permanently different. The concept of neuroplasticity, the brain's well-documented capacity to alter its own physical structure in response to experience and practice, operates precisely on this glacial timescale. The changes that meditation practice produces in the brain, the measurable thickening of cortical regions associated with attention and emotional regulation, the strengthening of connections between prefrontal and limbic regions that supports better emotional modulation, the reduction in the density of stress-reactive tissue in regions involved in fear and threat detection. These changes are not produced by a single session or a week of practice or even a month. They accumulate over years. They build layer upon layer through the consistent and humble practice of returning to the breath, of noticing the wandering of the mind and gently redirecting it, of being present to the present moment, one unhurried breath at a time. They are precisely glacial in their pace, and precisely glacial in their depth and durability once formed. Relict ice is one of the more quietly moving concepts in all of glaciology, and it carries a quality of gentle beauty when we allow it to speak to us about the inner life. Relict ice refers to ice that formed under climatic conditions that no longer exist in the current landscape. Ice that persists into the present not because the present climate would create it, but because it is sheltered, situated in a deep hollow or a permanent shadow, in a position within the landscape that protects it from the warmer conditions that would otherwise dissolve it. In some high mountain regions, in certain valleys and north-facing cirques that the sun barely reaches even in summer, there are pockets of relict ice that have survived from the last ice age, persisting for 10 or 12,000 years in a world that has been warming steadily all around them. They are ancient survivors, preserved not by their own effort, but by the particular geography of their situation. They carry within their depths the chemistry of a world that no longer exists outside of them. The relict ice in the glacier of the self is the hardest one and most precious of all the things we carry. It is the patience grown during a year when patience was the only thing standing between you and collapse. It is the compassion that came from learning, through unavoidable proximity, what it feels like to be someone else in deep pain. It is the quiet confidence that was built not by succeeding, but by failing and discovering that failure did not end you. It is the specific and irreplaceable strength that grows in the long aftermath of difficulty from having simply persisted. These qualities do not disappear when the circumstances that created them change. They do not dissolve when the crisis passes and the ordinary warmth of life returns. They settle into the sheltered hollows of character, preserved by the geography of who you have become, carrying within them the compressed chemistry of a season you have survived, enriching the present with a depth that could not have developed any other way. The psychological concept of post-traumatic growth is really the scientific description of this relict ice. It is the documentation of the fact that people who have survived significant hardship sometimes emerge with qualities they could not have developed through any easier route. A deeper capacity for connection, a more vivid appreciation of the preciousness of ordinary days, a greater tolerance for uncertainty, a quieter and more reliable kind of courage. These qualities are the relict ice of the difficult winter. They persist into the easier times not as wounds or burdens, but as resources, as the particular gifts that only the coldest and most demanding conditions can produce. And the work of psychological integration, of becoming someone who can carry these gifts forward without being weighed down by the difficulty that created them, is precisely the work of learning to carry relict ice, acknowledging its history, honoring its origin, and trusting that its presence in the deep interior makes the whole structure more precious, not more burdened. As you breathe now, allow yourself to acknowledge quietly the relict ice that you carry, the strengths that came from hard seasons, the wisdom that came from difficulty. You do not need to visit those seasons again tonight. You simply need to know that they are there in the deep interior, sheltered and preserved, and enriching the depth of who you are right now, in this quiet moment, in this generous and unhurried dark. There is a point in the movement of a glacier, in its innermost mechanics and over its full lifespan, where the processes of accumulation and flow and loss reach a kind of balance that glaciologists call the steady state. In this condition, the glacier is neither growing nor shrinking in any net sense over time. New snowfall in the upper accumulation zone replenishes, on average, what is being lost to melting and carving at the lower terminus. The ice flows continuously from where it is created to where it is released, maintaining through that continuous movement a dynamic balance that is not static, not frozen in the literal sense, but not changing in its fundamental character either. It is simply, in the most exact and most beautiful sense of the word, in balance. The glacier in steady state is not standing still. Every molecule of it is in motion. But the overall system, viewed across the appropriate timescale, is in equilibrium. The flow equals the loss. The accumulation equals the expenditure. Everything that arrives eventually departs, and everything that departs is replenished by what arrives. This is not stasis. This is not death or dormancy or the failure of movement. This is the dynamic, living, flowing equilibrium of a system perfectly in accord with its own nature. The psychological term that most closely corresponds to this glacial steady state is equanimity, and it deserves to be approached slowly and with care because it is so often misunderstood. Equanimity is not emotional flatness. It is not the suppression of feeling or the absence of response. It is not the achievement of a condition in which nothing touches you or has the power to disturb the surface of your experience. Equanimity, as understood in contemplative traditions and as increasingly documented in contemporary psychological research, is a quality of inner balance that allows the full range of human experience to move through the self without permanently disturbing its fundamental orientation. The equanimous person grieves and grieves fully without being permanently reorganized by grief. They experience fear and take it seriously without being dominated by it indefinitely. They feel joy and feel it completely without grasping at it or building their entire sense of security on its continuation. They move with the flow of experience the way the glacier moves with the flow of ice, continuously, flexibly, without rigidity, maintaining through that very movement the orientation and identity and characteristic depth that are the signature of their particular form of health. Research on equanimity consistently finds that it is associated with measurably lower rates of anxiety and depression, greater resilience in the face of loss and change, higher levels of reported well-being, and a stronger and more stable sense of meaning and purpose. And crucially, equanimity is cultivated, not inherited. It is built through practice, through the slow and patient work of returning, again and again, to the orientation of balance. Through the meditative practice of noticing when you have been swept away by the current of experience and gently, without self-criticism, returning to the center. Through the nightly practice of releasing the day's accumulation and trusting the deep ice of the self to hold its shape through the night. This is the dance we spoke of at the beginning of our journey, the meditative dance of perfect, effortless balance that characterizes the glacier in its most complete and beautiful expression. Not the forced stillness of something that will not move. Not the rigidity of something that refuses change or insists on permanence. But the dynamic equilibrium of something that moves so beautifully, so continuously, so perfectly in accordance with its own deepest nature, that the movement itself produces a quality of stillness. The way a perfectly smooth current of water looks, from a distance like a mirror. The way a glacier in its steady state contains within its constant flow the perfect embodiment of what we, from our brief human vantage, recognize as rest. Allow your breath to be such a current now. Allow the inhale and the exhale to find their own rhythm, not directed or forced or shaped by any intention other than the simple fact of needing to breathe. The chest rising and falling, the belly softening and expanding with each slow inhale, gently releasing with each exhale. The long, quiet, unhurried cycle of in and out, of receiving and releasing, of the fundamental glacial exchange between what accumulates and what departs, maintained in perfect balance through the long and generous hours of the night. There is nothing to do with this breath but allow it. Nothing to make it do or be. Simply the movement. Simply the flow. The body's preparation for deep sleep involves a cascade of physiological changes so beautifully orchestrated and so precisely timed that describing them has an almost musical quality. As the nervous system begins its shift from the active, alert, sympathetically dominated state of waking into the quieter, parasympathetically governed mode of pre-sleep and sleep, a sequence of neurochemical and physiological changes occurs that progressively and systematically releases the tension held in the body. Cortisol levels, which rise sharply in the early morning to promote waking and readiness, follow a diurnal curve that brings them to their daily minimum in the hours after midnight. The hormone melatonin, produced by the pineal gland deep in the brain in response to the fading of light, begins its slow rise in the bloodstream as darkness deepens, conveying to every cell in the body the information that night has arrived and the long work of the day is finished. Core body temperature begins to fall, dropping gradually by 0.5 degree to a full degree Celsius over the first hours of sleep, and this gentle thermal decline acts as one of the brain's primary sleep-inducing signals, communicating to the hypothalamus and the brainstem sleep centers that conditions are right for the transition into the long and restorative depths. The muscles begin to release their held tensions as the motor neurons that maintain them receive progressively less activation from the brain's descending pathways. This release is gradual and proceeds in its own order, and it can sometimes be felt quite directly as a progressive softening and heaviness that moves through the body like a slow tide. The feet and calves, which have carried the weight of the day. Then the larger muscles of the thighs and lower back. Then the muscles of the abdomen and chest. Then the shoulders, those great collectors of held tension, finally beginning to drop. The muscles of the face are often among the last to let go, and when they do, when the jaw unclenches and the forehead smooths and the eyes soften behind their closed lids, there is a quality of release so complete that it feels almost like a sigh that the whole body is making, quietly and without drama, in the generous dark. This is the body finding its terminal equilibrium. Not through decision or effort, but through the gradual and systematic release of every tension that the day required, the progressive dropping of every weight that wakefulness demanded be carried. It is the body melting toward its own steady state, the way the glacier moves towards sea level, not all at once and not through force, but through the patient application of conditions that make release not only possible, but inevitable. And this physical release is not separate from the psychological release we have been exploring together throughout this long and quiet evening. They are the same process, expressing itself simultaneously in the tissues of the body and in the structure of the mind, the way the glacier's movement expresses itself simultaneously in the surface flow and in the slow grinding of bedrock far below. The final image we carry with us, the last geological truth that will soften and dissolve into the background of your resting mind, is the image of the vast, quiet, ancient ice field in its most complete and undisturbed expression. Not the dynamic zones where crevasses open and the drama of geological change is visible and audible. Not the terminus where the glacier finally meets conditions that dissolve it back into water. But the interior, the deep, ancient, blue-lit, utterly still interior where the compressed time of millennia rests in absolute silence, in absolute coherence, in the deep structural peace of something that has become, through the patient accumulation of everything that has fallen upon it, exactly what it always was in the process of becoming. This is the image of the mind in its most restful and most complete state. Not empty, not blank, not switched off, but vast, expansive beyond ordinary measure, saturated with a deep, quiet blue that is the result of everything unnecessary, everything that was only ever the surface texture of the day, having been gently and naturally filtered away, leaving only the essential. The fundamental, the structural truth of who you are when you are not performing or managing or presenting the surface of yourself to the world that requires it. The mind as ice field, undisturbed and patient and capable of holding within its extraordinary depths the full record of everything that has made you without being overwhelmed by any particular piece of it. Simply present to itself, simply at rest, in the long and generous dark. Every snowflake that fell on the polar ice sheets over the past 800,000 years knew nothing of the record it was helping to create. Not one of those innumerable crystals intended to become part of a scientific archive. Not one of them chose to preserve the atmospheric chemistry of the epoch in which it formed. They simply fell, each one complete and unique, and they accumulated and they compressed, and they waited in the patient cold of the ice, and what they became, over the unimaginable span of glacial time, was something of enormous value. A record so complete, so faithfully preserved, so patient in its keeping, that it has genuinely changed our understanding of the planet we live on and the long story of the atmosphere that sustains us. You too are creating such a record right now. Not consciously or deliberately, but in the deep, automatic, profoundly patient way that the glacier creates its record. Through the accumulation of your experience, through the compression of your days into the structural foundation of your character, through the slow crystallization of the particular wisdom that only your particular life could ever have produced. Every night of genuine rest contributes to this record. Every night of deep and undisturbed sleep is a layer of Fian becoming ice, adding to the depth and density and quiet coherence of the self that will wake tomorrow and carry everything it has accumulated into another day. The glacier does not strive to be more than it is. It does not compare its depth against some ideal of glacial perfection or worry about whether it is accumulating quickly enough to justify its existence. It simply continues, layer by layer, season by season, in the quiet and unhurried practice of being exactly what it is, doing the only thing it knows how to do. And in that absolute fidelity to its own slow and patient nature, over the span of the time available to it, it creates one of the most extraordinary and precious structures on the surface of the earth. You are allowed to be exactly that. You are allowed to grow at the glacial pace, which is the only pace at which real and durable growth actually happens. You are allowed to carry within you the compressed record of everything you have experienced, without being permanently defined or constrained by any single layer of it. You are allowed to flow with the plastic flexibility of deep ice around the obstacles that life places in your path, without losing the fundamental integrity of who you are. You are allowed to maintain your steady state, your dynamic equilibrium, your particular quality of balance, not through rigidity, but through the same kind of flowing, continuous self-correction that the glacier maintains its equilibrium through its constant and unhurried movement. And you are allowed to rest, deeply and completely, in the vast and undisturbed quiet of the interior, where the blue light of your own essential nature illuminates the depths of who you are when everything unnecessary has been gently and naturally filtered away. Where the record of all that you have been is held faithfully and without judgment in the deep and patient dark. Where the terminal equilibrium of a mind at rest in its own nature is not a condition to be achieved, but a quality to be remembered. A depth to be returned to. A blue so deep and so quiet and so completely, utterly your own, that nothing that arrives at the surface can disturb it tonight. There is a practice among experienced mountaineers and polar explorers, those who have spent weeks or months in glaciated environments, of learning to read the surface of the snow. Not for any dramatic survival purpose, but simply because the surface of the glacier is a text, written in the language of weather and light and temperature and time, and learning to read it opens a quality of attention that has no real parallel in ordinary life. The surface of fresh snow after a light, dry fall is matte and brilliant, scattering light in all directions equally. The surface of older snow that has been warmed and refrozen is granular and slightly reflective, with a subtle sparkle at the right angle of light. The surface of blue ice exposed by wind scouring is smooth and almost glossy, with the deep, interior blue we have already spent so much time with tonight, visible through the top millimeters of clear crystal. Each of these surfaces tells a different story about what the glacier has been through. The fresh, airy surface tells of recent snowfall and cold, still air. The granular surface tells of a sun-warm afternoon followed by a freezing night. The blue ice surface tells of wind that has swept the surface clean of accumulation and of great depth below, of centuries of pressure expressing themselves in the particular quality of the light that comes up from within. To read the glacier's surface is to enter into a conversation with its history, to understand the present character of the ice by understanding something of the conditions that made it what it is. This capacity to read the surface in terms of the depth, to understand the visible in terms of the invisible history behind it, is one of the most valuable skills available to anyone trying to navigate their own psychological life with any degree of wisdom. The way a person responds to stress, the particular quality of their reactivity or their equanimity in a given situation, the speed with which they return to equilibrium after a difficulty, the depth of their patience in circumstances that would exhaust a shallower reserve. All of these surface behaviors are expressions of what has been forming in the interior across the long seasons of their development. They are legible to anyone who knows how to read the glacier, as the surface of the snow is legible to the practiced eye of the mountaineer. And this means that the process of self-understanding, of genuinely knowing oneself, is less about cataloging thoughts and feelings as they arise at the surface, and more about developing the capacity to read the surface in terms of what it tells you about the interior. Less about what happened today, and more about what layer is expressing itself through today's responses. Less about the immediate stimulus, and more about the deep, patient, compressed history from which the response arises. This is the kind of self-knowledge that cannot be hurried. It develops at the glacial pace, through the long and patient practice of attending to the relationship between surface and depth, between the immediate and the ancient, between what the day presented and what the interior is made of. The people who most consistently report high levels of psychological well-being and relational depth across the lifespan are not, typically, the ones who have most successfully managed their surface experience or most efficiently organized their daily activities. They are the ones who have, in some sense, learned to read their own glacier, who have developed enough familiarity with their own interior to recognize when a surface response is a genuine expression of the deep self, and when it is the product of an old layer, a long ago compressed and perhaps outdated record that is making itself felt in the present. This recognition, this capacity to see the depth beneath the surface, is itself a form of resilience, because it allows you to meet difficulty with something other than the automatic response of the nearest available layer. It allows you to choose, at least sometimes, and in the moments that matter most, to respond from the deep ice rather than the fresh snow. The aurora borealis, the northern lights, is perhaps the most extraordinary visual phenomenon associated with the high-latitude environments where glaciers live. It has nothing directly to do with the ice itself, arising instead from the interaction of solar wind with the Earth's magnetic field in the upper atmosphere, creating great, slow-moving curtains of light in greens and blues and occasional reds that fill the night sky above the ice in a display of such strangeness and beauty that it has generated. In every culture that has witnessed it, mythology and wonder, and the irresistible sense of being in the presence of something that exceeds ordinary categories. What the aurora and the glacier share, what makes them feel like two expressions of the same deep quality of the northern world, is the quality of silent movement. The glacier moves, as we have spent this entire evening exploring, but the movement is invisible to any ordinary observation. The aurora moves visibly, spectacularly, great luminous curtains shifting and shimmering across the sky, but it does so in complete silence. In the perfect acoustic quiet of a clear polar night, with the glacier below and the aurora above and the stars between, there is a quality of witnessed grandeur that occurs entirely without sound, entirely without announcement, entirely in the realm of the visual and the vast and the simply astonishing. And in that silence, in that complete absence of acoustic accompaniment to something so extraordinary, there is a recognition that some of the most significant things that happen in any life happen without sound, without announcement, without the particular kind of attention that noise demands. The deepest and most significant changes in the inner life happen this way, silently, invisibly, over spans of time too long for the ordinary attention to register. The shift in your relationship to a fear that you have been working with for years, which one day you simply notice is less large than it used to be, without any dramatic moment of release. The deepening of a quality of patience that has been forming since a particular difficult season and that you now simply express without thinking, as if it had always been part of your nature. The quiet, accumulated confidence that comes from having survived a number of things you were not sure you could survive, which eventually becomes the baseline rather than the exception. These are aurora changes, visible, eventually, and extraordinary when you finally see them, but built in silence and over time, without announcement or drama, in the deep and patient quiet of the interior. Allow the awareness of these silent changes, these aurora shifts in the geography of who you are, to be part of the quality of rest you are moving into tonight. Not as a reason for self-congratulation or for measuring how far you have come, but simply as a reminder that the interior is not static, is not the same as it was a year ago or 5 years ago, is slowly and continuously and surely becoming more of what it most essentially is. The glacier is moving. The aurora is shifting. The deep ice is forming, layer by patient layer, in the dark that surrounds you. And all of it is proceeding exactly as it should, at exactly the right pace, in exactly the right direction. You do not need to supervise it, or direct it, or accelerate it. You simply need to trust it, the way the glacier trusts the slow and reliable process of its own formation. The way the aurora trusts the quiet and invisible physics of its own extraordinary beauty. Consider for a moment the quality of trust that the glacier embodies simply by existing. It does not know whether the climate will continue to support its existence. It does not know whether the next season will bring sufficient snowfall to replenish what it loses at the terminus. It does not plan for the eventuality of its own dissolution or strategize about how to ensure its continuation across the next geological epoch. It simply continues doing what it does in the conditions it finds itself in, with the extraordinary dignity of something that is entirely and completely what it is. The trust is implicit, built into the very structure of the process. The glacier trusts the climate the way a living thing trusts that the conditions for life will continue to be present, not through any deliberate act of faith, but simply through the ongoing fact of its own existence. This is the quality of trust that the deepest and most restful sleep embodies, not the anxious, vigilant trust that must constantly monitor for confirmation, but the implicit, structural trust of a process simply continuing in the conditions it was designed for. The trust that the body knows how to breathe through the night, that the heart knows how to keep its rhythm in the dark, that the brain knows how to do the consolidating and the integrating and the compressing that it was built to do during the sleeping hours, that the morning will come and that you will wake in it, and that everything that needed to happen in the night will have happened without your supervision or your effort or your worry. Simply the trust of a glacier trusting the conditions of its own formation. Let that trust be present in your body now. Let it settle into the muscles that are continuing to release, into the breath that is continuing to slow, into the mind that is continuing to descend toward the deep blue of genuine rest. There is nothing threatening the night. There is nothing requiring your vigilance. The conditions for rest are present. The body knows what to do. The night is long and generous and unhurried. And the deep interior, patient and vast and endlessly blue, is simply waiting for you to stop monitoring the surface and allow yourself to sink into the extraordinary depth that was always here. The pressure that compresses Fian into ice is, from the perspective of the Fian itself, simply the weight of everything that came after. It is not aggressive or intentional. It does not arrive with any particular design or any awareness of what it is creating. It is simply the natural consequence of accumulation, that what is below bears the weight of what is above, and that this bearing, sustained over time, transforms the bearer. This is one of the most quietly truthful things about the glacial process, and it is quietly truthful about the human process as well. The weight that has been bearing on you, the accumulated weight of the responsibilities and the losses and the demands and the uncertainties of the life you have been living, has not been without effect. It has been compressing something in you, patiently and without your awareness, into something denser and more integrated and more capable of bearing the next weight than you were before. You have been being made into ice by the weight of your own life. And this, when you can feel it as the gift that it actually is one of the most reassuring things imaginable. Consider what happens to a single water molecule once it has been sealed into the deep ice. It is no longer moving freely through the liquid or the gas phase. It is held precisely and permanently within the lattice of the crystal, bonded to its neighbors in a fixed and elegant geometry. And yet it is not isolated. It is part of the larger structure, contributing its small and specific position to the coherence of the whole. In a real sense, it has become more itself by becoming part of something larger. The molecule's individual identity is not lost in the lattice. It is given a context that makes its existence meaningful in a way that no freely tumbling liquid molecule can quite achieve. It knows, in the most literal physical sense, where it belongs. This sense of belonging, of fitting into a larger structure with precision and with ease, is one of the things that genuine psychological integration provides. And it is one of the deepest gifts that sleep, when it is allowed to do its full work, returns to us night after night. In the deep stages of sleep, the individual experiences and impressions of the day are not simply stored as separate files in some mental archive. They are incorporated into the larger structure of the self, bonded to related memories and emotional patterns and existing knowledge in a process that is, neurologically, almost exactly analogous to crystallization. The new experience finds its place within the lattice. It bonds to what surrounds it. It becomes part of the coherent whole. And the whole, in turn, becomes slightly richer and slightly more complex and slightly more capable of navigating the next day's challenges because of what the night has done. Glaciologists have a term for the zone within a glacier where the transition from firn to true ice is complete. They call it the line of densification, and it marks, approximately, the boundary below which the interconnected air pockets of firn have finally closed off entirely, sealed within the ice matrix, transformed from open space into the small, discrete bubbles that will persist for centuries as records of the atmosphere. Below this line, the ice has become something fundamentally different from what it was above it. Not better or worse, but more fully itself. More capable of the things that ice can do that firn cannot, bearing weight across vast distances, preserving its internal record without distortion, flowing with the particular grace of something whose structure is fully realized. There is a line of densification in the psychological life as well, though it does not mark a single moment or a specific achievement. It is the threshold, different for every person and shifting throughout the lifespan, at which a particular quality of growth becomes fully integrated, fully part of who you are, no longer something you are practicing or working toward, but simply something you are. The patience that was once effortful becoming simple nature. The compassion that was once a daily decision becoming an automatic response. The resilience that was once something you had to consciously summon becoming the first thing that shows up when difficulty arrives. This integration happens below the surface, in the deep and patient work of the night, in the slow crystallization of everything you have been practicing. And it is not sudden. It is the gradual, unmistakable, permanent realization of a structure that was always forming in you. The science of glacial movement contains within it one of the most counterintuitive and quietly beautiful facts in all of natural science. Glacial ice moves fastest not at its surface, but at its base, where it meets the bedrock below. At the surface, the ice is constrained by the weight above it, held in place by the enormous pressure of all the compressed snow and ice bearing down from higher elevations. But at the base, where the pressure is greatest, and where the temperature of the bedrock sometimes provides just enough warmth to create a thin film of meltwater, the ice slides. It flows along this interface with a freedom that the compressed middle of the glacier cannot achieve. The very bottom of the deepest ice, the oldest and most compressed and most pressurized part of the entire structure, moves the most freely. This seems paradoxical until you understand it as a fundamental truth about the relationship between depth and freedom. It is precisely because of the enormous pressure of everything above it, the weight of all the accumulated layers, that the basal ice generates the conditions for its own freedom of movement. The weight that might seem to be a prison is actually the engine of liberation. The depth that might seem to be the place of maximum constraint is actually the place of maximum flow. And this is, in the end, the essential paradox of the glacier and the essential paradox of the sleeping mind, that the most profound and the most enduring freedom of movement is found not at the anxious, vigilant surface, but in the deep, weighted, compressed, ancient interior. When you rest tonight, allow yourself to sink toward that depth, not through effort or direction, but simply by releasing the surface, releasing the monitoring and the managing and the vigilance that the day required, allowing the weight of the night, the weight of the blanket and the darkness and the quiet and the long, trustworthy hours of sleep to press you gently toward the base. Toward the deep, ancient, blue-lit interior, where the oldest and most essential parts of you move with a freedom that the busy surface never quite achieves. This is the freedom that deep sleep provides. Not the freedom of escape or avoidance, or the temporary relief of distraction, but the freedom of a self moving in complete accord with its own nature, finding the path of least resistance through the landscape of its own depths. There is a phenomenon in glaciology called surging, and while it is dramatic and sometimes destructive in its actual geological manifestation, it carries within it a useful and calming insight when translated into the vocabulary of the inner life. A surging glacier is one that has accumulated, over decades or centuries, a stored energy of pressure and tension in its internal structure, often because some obstruction or thermal condition has prevented it from flowing at its normal rate. And then, in a relatively sudden release of all that stored potential, it moves. Quickly, sometimes dramatically, covering in a year the distance it might ordinarily cover in a century, reshaping the landscape around it in a matter of months. The insight is not that you should wait for your own sudden surge. The insight is about the relationship between patience and release, between the long, quiet accumulation of potential and the moment when that potential is finally free to express itself. There are seasons in the psychological life when growth seems to have stopped, when the work of development feels invisible and perhaps even illusory, when the glacier appears from the surface to be standing still. And then there are the periods of sudden, unexpected clarity, the moments of surging integration when all the work of the patient seasons expresses itself all at once, and you discover that you are not the same person you were before the quiet time, not the same person you were before the long, invisible accumulation of all those unremarkable days and ordinary nights. These surges of integration are not accidental. They are the product of everything that came before them, the necessary expression of a structure that had been forming in the patient dark. And tonight, as you rest, you are contributing to the conditions that make such surges possible. You are doing the quiet, unsexy, profoundly important work of accumulation. You are adding a layer. And somewhere in the deep interior, something that has been forming for a long time is becoming, very gradually and with absolute certainty, a little more fully what it was always in the process of becoming. The color blue has been associated across cultures and throughout human history with qualities that cluster around the same psychological territory: depth, calm, reliability, the infinite. The blue of clear, deep water. The blue of a cloudless sky at noon. The blue of distance, of mountains seen from far away, of the horizon where sea meets sky and the eye cannot quite resolve where one ends and the other begins. There is evolutionary and neurological support for the association. Blue in the visual environment tends to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, to lower heart rate and blood pressure slightly, to shift the brain toward a more reflective and less reactive mode of engagement. Blue is the color that does not demand. And so it is perhaps not accidental that the deepest and most ancient ice on Earth expresses itself as blue. That the ice which has been compressed longest, held under the greatest pressure, formed in the most patient and the most complete manner, radiates from its interior the color that our nervous systems recognize across all our evolutionary history as the signature of depth and safety and rest. The blue of the deep ice is not merely a pretty detail of glacial science. It is a message. It is the ice telling the viewer, in the only language that light knows, here is depth. Here is patience. Here is the color of something that has been forming for a very long time and has nothing left to prove. This is the color of the mind that has arrived at genuine rest. Not the pale, anxious surface blue of eyes that are only closed but not quite at ease. but the deep, saturated, ancient blue of a consciousness that has descended all the way to its own base, that has released the vigilance of the surface, that has trusted the weight of the night to hold it in its proper place. This is what is available to you right now, in the depths of this long and quiet evening. This is the blue that is forming in you, compression by compression, breath by breath, as each slow exhale releases a little more of what the day asked you to hold, and a little more of the deep, undisturbed blue of your own essential nature is free to be seen. The sound environment of a glacier is worth spending a few moments inside, because it is one of the most complete embodiments of true quiet that exists anywhere on Earth. Ice absorbs sound, not perfectly and not in all frequencies equally, but with a thoroughness that changes the acoustic quality of any space it dominates. Inside a glacier, the sound of your own heartbeat becomes audible. The sound of your own breathing, normally masked by the ambient noise of the inhabited world, is distinct and present and real. The small sounds of the body, the subtle creak and shift of tissue, the blood moving through vessels, the very quiet hum of metabolism become part of the soundscape because there is nothing else large enough to drown them out. This is the acoustic environment that the deepest states of sleep approach. Not absolute silence, because the body is never entirely quiet, but a quality of reduced external input so complete that the small sounds of the interior become perceptible and even, in their way, reassuring. The heartbeat is regular. The breath is slow. The body is doing what the body does in the deep, competent, completely reliable way that it has always done. And in the awareness of these small, continuous sounds of being alive, there can arise a quality of trust in the body itself, in its deep competence, in its patient and unhurried commitment to the work of keeping you well, that is profoundly calming. The glacier does not worry about sounding like a glacier. It simply sounds like what it is. And what it is, in the deep quiet of its own interior, is enough. Research on the internal experience of sleep, gathered through the relatively recent technique of asking people about their experiences immediately upon being awakened from various stages of sleep, has found that the deepest stages of non-REM sleep are characterized not by dreams or mental imagery, but by a quality that researchers describe as consciousness without content. A state of awareness that is present and yet not occupied by anything in particular. Not thinking, not dreaming, not remembering or planning or worrying. Simply being aware in the most spacious and most fundamental sense, without any object for that awareness to attach to. This is what the Tibetan Buddhist tradition has called clear light sleep, and what the yogic traditions have described as the state of deep sleep, in which the individual self dissolves temporarily into the larger ground of awareness from which it arose. Whatever language we use for it, the experiential quality is consistent across traditions and across the research literature. It is vast. It is quiet. It is blue, if blue is a quality of consciousness rather than merely a color of light. You are moving toward that vastness right now. The scattered, chattering, managing surface of consciousness is growing quieter. The monitoring and the evaluating and the comparing are losing their grip. The to-do list is dissolving at its edges, becoming less a list and more a vague and unimportant cloud, drifting at a great distance from the still center of where you actually are. The breath is slower than it was when this journey began. The body is heavier against the surface it rests on, settled and held and completely at ease. The mind is turning inward, the way the light turns inward when it enters the ice, traveling deeper with each breath, becoming more blue with each slow exhale, moving toward the vast and undisturbed interior where nothing is asked and nothing is required and everything, at last, is simply and completely still. The interior of the glacier is not a single continuous mass of uniform ice. It is structured, layered, marked throughout by the visible and invisible signatures of the seasons that formed it. Dark bands of volcanic ash from ancient eruptions, thin layers of meltwater refrozen at the surface of dry summers, subtle changes in crystal size that mark the boundary between years of heavy snowfall and years of sparse accumulation. The glacier's interior is a record, layer by layer, of everything that has happened in the world above it. But the record is not chaotic or overwhelming. It is organized by the same patient forces of compression and crystallization that organize the ice itself, each layer compressed into its proper position, each record maintained in its proper relationship to what came before and what came after, the whole history held in coherent and readable form. This is what a well-rested mind carries. Not the chaotic, unintegrated, overwhelming accumulation of raw experience, but the organized, layered, coherent record of a life that has had time, through the daily practice of sleep, to compress its accumulations into something structured and navigable and real. The experiences that were most significant occupy their proper layers of memory, held at the appropriate depth, accessible when needed and quiet when not. The smaller accumulations of ordinary days settle into the background, present and part of the structure without demanding the foreground. And the whole history, the entire layered record of the self, is held in a way that is not burdensome but enriching, not a weight to be dragged forward but a foundation to stand on. This is the gift that consistent, deep, unhurried sleep gives. Not merely the absence of the fatigue that sleep deprivation creates. Not merely the restoration of the cognitive functions that decline with insufficient rest, but the ongoing maintenance of the internal archive, the continued organization of the layered record, the nightly compression and integration and crystallization of experience into the structured, coherent, navigable form that allows a person to inhabit their own life with a sense of continuity and meaning and depth. Sleep is the glacier's work, the work that happens below the surface, in the patient dark, without drama or announcement, building layer by layer the structure that makes everything else possible. Allow this recognition to settle into your body now, as the breath continues its slow and regular cycle, and the muscles continue their gentle, progressive release, and the mind continues its patient and unhurried descent toward the deep blue of genuine rest. You are doing something profoundly valuable right now in this act of resting. Not passive, not wasted, not an interruption of the real work of your life. This is the real work. This is the nightly process of becoming a little more integrated, a little more coherent, a little more fully the person you are in the process of becoming. This is the layer forming. This is the pheon becoming ice. This is the compression and the crystallization and the slow, patient, extraordinary work of the glacier. The vast and open expanse of the ice field, seen from above in the long polar summer when the sun barely sets and the light is horizontal and gold for hours at a time, has a quality that pilots and scientists who have flown over it consistently describe as vertiginous in its scale. Not frightening, but humbling. The kind of vertigo that comes not from danger, but from the encounter with something so much larger than the ordinary frame of reference that the usual measures and comparisons fall away. This is not a field you can walk across in an afternoon. This is not a landscape you can take in from a single viewpoint and feel that you have understood. It simply continues in every direction beyond the reach of the eye, beyond the horizon, beyond the range of ordinary comprehension. The mind at rest has this quality of scale. Not the cramped, occupied, managed quality of a mind in the midst of its daily performance, where every available surface is covered with the tasks and concerns and obligations of the present moment. But the vast, open, barely bounded quality of a mind that has released its grip on urgency and allowed itself to expand into the available space of the night. Researchers who study the phenomenology of deep meditative states and the deep stages of sleep describe a consistent quality of what they call spaciousness, a felt sense of the boundaries of the self becoming less defined, less defended, less effortfully maintained. Not a dissolution of identity, but an expansion of it, a relaxation of the energy ordinarily spent on holding the self together into a discrete and bounded package. This spaciousness is available to you right now, as the night deepens and the breath slows and the muscles release, and the vigilant surface of the mind turns inward and down. You do not need to manufacture it, or seek it, or achieve it. It is simply what remains when enough of the ordinary effort of being awake has been released. The glacier does not try to be vast. It simply is, and its vastness is the natural consequence of its own accumulation over time. The spaciousness of the resting mind is simply what becomes available when the accumulation of the day has been set down, and the patient, ancient depth of the self is allowed to be what it always already is. Breathe into that spaciousness now. Allow the sense of your own boundaries to soften slightly, not to dissolve, but to relax, the way the edges of the glacier soften at the margins where ice meets air, and the hard definition of the form becomes something more gradual, more gradated, more like a conversation between two states than a hard line between them. Allow the space between one thought and the next to become slightly wider, slightly quieter, slightly more filled with the same quality of profound and patient stillness that fills the interior of the glacier, not empty, but full of everything that matters, held in perfect and unhurried coherence. The temperature within the deep interior of a glacier is remarkably stable. At great depth, far below the surface, where seasonal temperature variations penetrate, and far below the zones where the heat of friction and pressure creates local warmth, the ice maintains a temperature that is essentially constant. Not warm, not cold in any ordinary sense, but stable. Unchanging from hour to hour, from season to season, from century to century. This thermal stability is itself a form of preservation, because it is precisely this unchanging temperature that maintains the integrity of the crystal structure and ensures that the ancient ice can hold its records without distortion across the enormous span of geological time. The human core temperature, which we spoke of earlier as one of the body's signals for the approach of sleep, undergoes its own quiet stabilization in the hours of deep rest. The temperature regulation systems, which require constant, low-level effort to maintain during the day, relax into a simpler pattern in the deep night. The core cools. The extremities warm slightly as blood is redistributed. The overall system settles into a thermal equilibrium that is, in its own way, as stable and as complete as the thermal equilibrium of the glacial interior. And in this stability, in this quiet and reliable constancy, there is a quality of ease that the body recognizes and responds to with deepening rest. You can feel this stability in your body right now. The temperature of the skin against the sheets. The warmth of the breath leaving the body. The slight, almost imperceptible difference in temperature between your skin and the air above it. These small thermal facts are the body's version of the glacier's deep constancy, the signs of a system in thermal equilibrium, doing what it does with the same patient reliability with which the glacier maintains its temperature across the centuries. You are in your own deep interior right now. You are in the stable, constant, ancient temperature of genuine rest. There is one more thing worth knowing about glaciers, and it is perhaps the most beautiful thing of all, and it is this: glaciers are where rivers begin. In the mountains and the polar regions where glaciers persist, it is the slow and patient melting at their base and their edges, the gradual release of water that was locked in ice for centuries or millennia, that feeds the rivers that flow down to the valleys and the lowlands and the sea. The glacier does not simply accumulate and hold. It gives. Its very existence, its patient compression and preservation of water through the long, cold seasons, is preparation for the gift it will eventually offer: the steady, reliable, life-giving flow of water into the landscapes below it. This is the final truth of the glacier as a metaphor for the resting mind. The depth and the compression and the patient preservation that sleep provides is not an end in itself. It is preparation. The deep rest of the night is the accumulation zone, the place where what is given to it is compressed and preserved and integrated, so that what flows from it into the days and weeks and years ahead is steady, reliable, nourishing, and real. The equanimity, the resilience, the wisdom, the clear and unhurried attention that a well-rested person brings to their life does not come from nowhere. It flows from the glacier of the night, from the patient, invisible, profoundly important work that is happening right now as you breathe and rest, and allow the slow crystallization of your own depth to continue its long, unhurried work. You are the glacier. You are the accumulation zone and the zone of densification and the deep, blue-lit interior and the slowly moving base and the source of the river that will flow from you into tomorrow. All of it is already present in you, forming and deepening and settling into its proper position with the same patient, unhurried, extraordinary beauty with which the ice forms in the deep. There is nothing to do but allow it. There is nowhere to be but here, in the deep interior, in the constant temperature, in the ancient and reliable dark. The voice is growing quieter now, not because there is less to say, but because the saying has done what saying can do, and the rest belongs entirely to you. To the body that knows how to sleep. To the mind that knows how to let go. To the ancient, patient, blue-lit interior of a self that has been forming, through all the seasons of your life, into exactly this. Exactly this depth. Exactly this coherence. Exactly this quality of compressed, crystallized, plastic, flowing, vast, and quiet strength. Rest now. Rest in the knowledge that you have been forming something of extraordinary value, layer by patient layer, through all the ordinary and extraordinary seasons of the life that brought you here. Rest in the knowledge that the deep ice of who you are is solid enough to bear anything the surface will bring, and flexible enough to flow around any obstacle that appears in the path. Rest in the knowledge that the blue light of genuine clarity is not something you need to achieve or maintain or perform. It is simply what remains when enough of the surface noise has scattered away, and the deep interior is allowed to simply be what it has always been. The glacier does not rush toward the sea. It arrives in its own time, having given everything it carries along the way, nourishing everything it passes, leaving the landscape it traverses permanently changed by the patient, persistent, gentle force of its presence. This is what you are doing tonight. This is what you do every night that you allow yourself to rest in the full depth of what you are. You are moving slowly and with absolute certainty toward everything that you were always in the process of becoming. Go there now. Go into the deep blue interior of your own rest, and let the night, vast and patient and ancient as the ice, carry you the rest of the way. As we reach the end of our journey tonight, you might notice how wide and quietly connected this world has become. The snow that fell on a polar ice field 10,000 years ago and the breath moving through your body right now are made of the same water, cycling through the same vast and patient system that has been circulating through the atmosphere and the ice and the oceans and the living things for as long as the earth has carried water in its embrace. The glacier that holds the record of ancient atmospheres and the mind that holds the record of a lifetime of accumulated experience are both archives of a similar kind, repositories of what has been, shaped by everything that has fallen upon them, patient in their keeping, available to be read by those willing to go deep enough and be still enough to encounter what lives in the interior. The crystalline architecture of resilience, the plastic flow of genuine flexibility, the blue light of a mind that has learned to filter what serves from what overwhelms, the relict ice of hard-won wisdom carried forward into easier times, the terminal equilibrium of a self in dynamic balance across the long seasons of a life. All of these are available to you. Not as concepts to be mastered, but as qualities already present, already formed, already expressing themselves in the deep interior of who you are right now. You did not need to earn them tonight. You needed only to be reminded of them. And perhaps that remembering, gentle and slow and unhurried as the accumulation of snow on a surface willing to receive it, is its own form of the homecoming that sleep provides. Now that knowledge can soften. You do not need to remember every detail or name. Let the ideas settle like snowflakes onto the patient surface of a mind that has been receiving them all evening, one by one, each one complete and quietly valuable. Let the images of ice and blue light and patient depth dissolve into something simpler and warmer, the felt sense of your own weight resting where it rests, the gentle rhythm of your own breath moving in its own perfect cycle, the ordinary and extraordinary comfort of being safely held by darkness and quiet, and the long, unhurried trust of the night. The glacier does not think about being a glacier. It simply is one, in the full depth and patient continuity of that beautiful word. And you do not need to think about being yourself tonight. You simply are in this quiet moment, in this dark, in this rest, exactly and completely and beautifully yourself. If you have enjoyed drifting through this gentle journey, you are always welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a quiet thought below. It helps this space reach other curious minds who might be winding down too. And if you happen to still be awake, there will be another video waiting on the screen, ready to carry you a little further into calm and curiosity. But for now, there is nothing else to do. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders sink. Allow the day to loosen its grip, knowing you can return to these ideas whenever you wish. Let insight heal you into sleep. Sleep well and good night.